Okay, so next week I'm going to pass those Bibles out to y'all and see how y'all do. The Rosetta Stone, exactly. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this text from the book of Acts. This text is really a great example for us, or a great model for us about how we can talk about our faith, our belief in Jesus Christ to other people without coming across as, I don't know, rude. See, Paul does a great job here of talking to people of a different religion. He does it without calling them any names. He does it without getting angry. He does it without bashing their religion. He does it without telling them that they are wrong. He really does a good job because he includes some of the culture that they know. He includes respect for who they are and their beliefs already before he begins to tell them about Jesus Christ. Eugene Peterson, the guy who did the translation of the Bible called The Message, he writes Paul's speech, Paul's sermon, in these words. It's plain to see you Athenians take your religion seriously. When I arrived here the other day, I was fascinated with all the shrines I came across. And then I found one inscribed, "To the God nobody knows." I'm here to introduce you to this God, so you can worship intelligently, know who you are dealing with. The God who made the world and everything in it, this master of sky and land, doesn't live in custom-made shrines or need the human race to run errands for him. Starting from scratch, he made the entire human race and made the earth hospitable with plenty of time and space for living so we could seek after God and not just grope around in the dark, but actually find him. God doesn't play hide and seek with us. He is not remote. He's near. We live and move in him, can't get away from him. One of your poets said it well. We are the God created. Well, if we are the God created, it doesn't make a lot of sense to think we could hire a sculptor to chisel a God out of stone for us, does it? God overlooks it as long as you don't know any better. But that time is past. The unknown is known. And he's calling for a radical life change. He has set a day when the entire human race will be judged and everything set right. And he has already appointed the judge, confirming him before everyone by raising him from the dead. Now, a Methodist pastor down in the Austin area, having read this passage, had this to say about it. In Acts 17, Paul gives us one of the best models for evangelism, for mission, for faith sharing. He is Jewish and is in a very Greek culture, surrounded by Greek thought. In the Areopagus, he is surrounded by gods and idols, and thankfully, even a tribute or an altar to the unknown God. Rather than bash their religion and culture, and rather than boast about the rightness of his own, he speaks to them where they are, using their own poets, and simply invites them to consider this creator God who raised Jesus from the dead. When some reject him, he does not become indignant or frustrated. He steps down and walks away. Walks out with those who have questions and who want to know more. Oh, that we would learn to talk with folks of other faiths or of other perspectives in such an engaging and honest way. Let us learn what our own cultural poets are, what they are writing, and use the very elements of Western North American culture to reach the people around us. This scripture can teach us how we can share our faith with others. In addition to teaching us how we can share our faith with others, it should also cause us to take a good look at our own faith. take a good look at what we say we believe. Take a good look at how we understand this God we believe in. So before Paul got down to the Areopagus and gave this sermon, he had been spending a few days in Athens, and he had been walking around throughout, kind of exploring Athens. Has anyone ever been to Athens before? Man, that place is sick with idols. There are statues everywhere. You can't go anywhere without tripping over a statue from 3,000 years ago. It's amazing. It's truly a beautiful, magnificent place with, still to this day, I can't tell you how many remnants of these shrines and these idols that Paul was talking about. You know, in our culture, we don't normally talk about idols in that sense. Our idols have to do with the television reality shows most of the time. But these idols are stone figures that have been made that the people come and worship their gods to. So Paul was wandering around Athens and saw how abundant these statues and these shrines were. And by seeing how abundant they were, Paul could tell how important they were to the people of Athens. So I have a challenge for each of you for this next week, if you can. I want you to take some time and do exactly what Paul did. Don't wander around Athens, wander around Longview. And take a look at what you see. What do you see in Longview that is abundant? What do you see that tells you what is important to us in Longview? So I'll give you a little heads up. I did that this week, and I'll tell you some of the things that I saw. And next week after you do it, maybe we can compare some notes. So one thing that we have a lot of in Longview, I mean a whole lot of, are churches, right? We have a lot of churches. And on its face value, that is great news, because that means there are so many people that we need that many buildings to fill up worship space for people to worship God. But we know that's not really the case. Part of the reason, I think, we have so many churches is because so many of us are insistent that the way we understand God is the right way to understand God. Those churches have sometimes more to do with our own thinking than the way we want to worship God. Now, you'll see a bunch of churches, and a lot of the churches you'll see are huge. They're massive. They're beautiful. Some churches in Longview even take up an entire city block. Can you imagine? Now, when people talk about why these churches are good, they say, well, it needs to be that big and that beautiful to really glorify God. What does Paul say about that? God doesn't need a shrine made by human hands. That's interesting. Some other things I noticed around town, I noticed lots of examples of the oil and gas industry, right? I mean, you can't throw a rock without hitting an oil derrick or a pipeline around here. There are trucks, there are signs, there are people who work for it. Oil and gas industry is everywhere. And on its surface, that's exactly what it is. It is just oil and gas industry. But the oil and gas industry that is so important is more than just an industry. It points to what drives that industry. It points to money. And there's a lot of evidence of things pointing to money in this town around us. Also saw a lot of athletic complexes, and I think probably that tells us how much we really prize physical fitness in Longview. Yeah, probably not. But as we drive around this town, and as you look at the things that are abundant, and as you look at the things that are important, you may come up with a different conclusion about what these things mean to us who live in Longview. And if you do, please share them. But the things that are abundant are obviously the things that are important. In Athens, those were the idols. In Longview, I don't know what that means. Sometimes what we say we believe and how we live out that belief are two entirely different things. sometimes we profess a certain belief and live in a completely different way. Has anyone ever heard of a guy named Shane Claiborne? Anybody? No? He's a Christian writer and an activist, and he's written several books. And one of the books that he's written was called Jesus for President, which is also a really cool Wilco, Billy Bragg song, but it has nothing to do with the book. So if you want to hear that song, I recommend it. Jesus for President. Sorry for my sidetrack. I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, but essentially, in his book, one of the many things that Shane Claiborne talks about for Christians doing what they say they believe, has to do with the Christian understanding of being pro-life. He says being pro-life is more than just being anti-abortion for a Christian. He says if you are pro-life, that means you are pro the life of that child once that child is born. It means that you are willing to take that child into your home when the mother dies. It means that you are willing to provide for the life of the mother and the child when they have nothing left. That's what pro-life should mean for a Christian, according to Shane Claiborne. Sometimes what we say and what we do are two different things. I mean, could you imagine if we were to apply that to politicians? I mean, I'm 40 years old, and I would wager that every president of my lifetime has said something and then done something completely different. We could spend all day going through that list. Sometimes what we say we believe and what we really believe are two different things. Paul, when he's talking to the Athenians, he is living out what he really believes. Again, idolatry is not what it once was. And people don't necessarily have so obvious an example of idolatry as what Paul saw in Athens. But you better believe it that idolatry is still alive and well. I mean, we might have a water tower on our hill instead of the Parthenon, but idolatry is still out there. Sometimes it is obvious, sometimes it is subtle. If you don't believe me, think about what has happened with Confederate statues over the last year or so. Chunks of rock. And because of those chunks of rock, people have gotten violent and have gotten killed. Idolatry is real. But idolatry is also more subtle. There are many more subtle ways that can attack our lives. We each, probably at some point in our life, have idols. Maybe it's our image. Maybe it's this desire for success. Maybe it's competition. Maybe it's a need for money. Maybe it is who knows what. But whatever that shapes us and forms our lives, that can become our idol. This text does two things for us good Christians. It tells us a good way to share our faith. And it challenges us. It challenges us to take a really good, hard look at our own faith and ask the question, do our lives really reflect what we say